Hi, everyone. It's Imogen here with Body Intelligence, and I'm here again with my guest, Miriam Grace, in the third of our conversations about the emotional body. Miriam's a psychotherapist, and we're kind of looking at some different concepts through the lens of kind of Gestalt psychotherapy mainly and Alexander technique mainly, and we may pull from other things as well. And this week we're considering the question of getting back out there. And we put the subtitle on Hope and Dread as we start to emerge from the pandemic. So welcome, Miriam. And maybe we can start by, what is it about this idea of re-entry that you think it's important for us to consider, and maybe especially right now, obviously? So.
Well, I think that any sort of exposure will increase adrenaline. So, we need to be aware that it can bring up stressful feelings, and it can be linked to some of some of our past experiences of perhaps, starting school or and so on. So
When you say exposure, you mean doing certain things, and maybe doing things that we haven't done over the last year very much, or not at all, and maybe having to do them in a new way as well.
So there's exposure to experiences, and I suppose the main thing that was in my mind when I said that was exposure to other people. We were talking earlier, weren't we, about how often when I'm starting my groups, I invite participants to just close their eyes and be with themselves, their body and their thoughts and their emotions, and just to be with themselves and to know their truth. And then I invite them to open their eyes and to connect with the rest of the group, and to notice how their awareness of themselves and how the feelings change. And I think this is that on a grand scale. We're going perhaps, some of us, some of us have been privileged enough to be able to be at home and following our own needs to some extent. Do I need to rest? Do I need a drink? Do I need to lie down? Do I want to do some more work? And so on. And now we step out and we're suddenly aware of, everyone else, and what are they doing, and what do they think about what I'm doing?
Yeah, I'm thinking this is maybe a bit more of a kind of cut and dry experience in the UK than it is here in the US, where you've had quite a strict lockdown that is just lifted, or a lot of the restrictions have lifted, throughout the country, whereas in the US it's different from state to state. Here in Delaware, we haven't had a full lockdown since last spring, but we've been living with restrictions for a long time. But people like me who are able to work from home, have been living, a bit of a different life over the last year. And we were saying we really acknowledge the privilege of that, and appreciate the essential workers who have been out there throughout, doing the many and various things that we need every day for health and food and electricity and all sorts of things that I'm probably not even aware of. So yes.
Yes. So I suppose, one thing when we come out of our, sort of more isolated environment, that is that it's not just what other people think of us, it's what we think other people think of us. So there's like do people think I should have got the grey covered over in my hair, or do people think I'm terribly risky by going to the hairdresser and getting the grey? And so we've got this extra dimension. There's not only the self-evaluation, there's that we project this out and imagine others evaluating us. So that will increase our stress, because it's so important to our survival that we belong and fit in. So we have to sort of manage this balance between autonomy and being self-caring, self-responsible, self-directed, and wanting to be part of a community where we cooperate and work together. And I think a lot of our work is around helping people to connect more with themselves and to be aware of what they need and how to meet their own needs. So I do that in a more psychological way.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about, kind of newness, and it might not be that doing the thing is completely new, but we maybe haven't done it for a year or several months, and we may have to do it in a slightly different way because there are protocols and restrictions in place still. And you mentioned the adrenaline. You said something about adrenaline actually helps us cope. So I'm curious about that.
Well, it helps us to be alert, but I think a lot of the techniques that we both use in different ways in our work help people to be able to consciously switch the alert off afterwards, because the alert comes on automatically, but most of us in childhood are never taught how to switch that off. So that's what quite a lot of my work is. And
so it's not staying in that heightened kind of hyper alert state. It's knowing when that's over and we don't need it anymore, and having some tools that I don't know, help us be present, I guess. And
I think those tools are so important, because one of the dangers around feeling this sort of discomfort of going out into the world is that we can think, oh, I feel uncomfortable, there's something wrong, I need to solve it or medicate it. So it's like, do you take a tranquilizer, drink a bottle of wine, eat a high carb meal? What are you going to do to take away this discomfort? And part of life is discomfort. And I think how we were saying, when we were talking about some of the things we're going to be doing in the workshop that we're running in June, is about techniques to be present with what is, rather than developing a whole new neurosis around that. So a neurosis would be where the comforting behavior becomes more of a problem than the lack of ease or the discomfort.
So we were kind of talking about it's definitely my work in the Alexander technique, and your work with therapy gives us tools to be more comfortable in the discomfort. Have some being present with it, but also kind of know that it's okay to feel these things and not sort of get sucked in. I talked about I feel like Alexander technique helps me to be a bit more of an observer of what's going on. So I'm very present to it, but I'm not sort of stuck right in it, or not all the time.
That gives us more choice. Then we have our feelings rather than our feelings having us, which is really important to me, that we don't repress our feelings and deny them. We don't say we're not anxious or about things, but that those feelings don't dictate our every move, that we can reflect on that. And I think we were interestingly, with you working more with the body and I work more with the mind and the emotions, we were talking about personal examples where staying still at the moment might feel more comfortable initially, but would really impinge on our lives. So
right.
you were using an example of going away,
Yeah.
and booking a break, and I was using the example of, you know, some of the physical exercise that I need to take to improve my health and mobility, and you know, I don't want to do it really because it's not that comfortable. It's not painful and it's not harming me, but it's not that comfortable, and I don't really feel, you know, inclined to do it. But that's sort of a false self-soothing that would mean that eventually I became more and more restricted in my movement and more stiff, and and you wouldn't get to go on your break.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like and this is the thing, that we can feel more than one thing at once as well, you know, because I'm very excited at thought of getting away to the beach, see the ocean for a couple of days. And we have not been away from home for a year. So so it's that kind of that mixture. But if I didn't ever go, leave the quote unquote safety of my home, which may or may not be true. I don't think it's any less safe staying in a holiday rental at the beach than being in my own home. But anyway, it's very interesting to kind of observe all that.
And lack of familiarity will produce, you know, a bit of anxiety, a bit of edginess. But, you know, it's partly up to us to decide whether to call that anxiety or excitement. And
I think it's both.
And it's also up to us whether, you know, whether we can use that energy to step forward in our lives, to step forward in spring, and to go out and take reasonable, adventurous ventures, and calculated risks. You know, it is more risky probably to step outside your door, you know, than to stay wrapped in cotton wool at home. Although, you know, something might fall out of the sky on your house. I don't know. At the end of the day, we have, you know, we have to move into a little bit of edginess to really live.
Well, I'm thinking about both our work and even doing this Facebook Live. There's a moment where it's a little bit uncomfortable to speak in front of, we don't know who's going to be listening to us, whether live or watching the replay, doing workshops, doing presentations about our work to people, which is really important to us both. And you know, if we let any nerves about this, we could let that discomfort stop us from doing
our passion
work that's really important. Yes, exactly.
It's our heart work, isn't it? So can I just ask you a question, Imogen? We spoke about how we can use anchors within our body to come back to a sense of safety or groundedness. How are you right now in our live stream? How are you using?
So one thing that I do is like noticing my contact with the surface that I'm resting on. So I'm noticing my feet on the ground and my connection to the chair. I can expand and notice the space around me. I could tune in and notice my breath. I have a way of leading people to notice ease. There's a little more to it than that, but it's a little way of it's kind of reframing how we're perceiving what's going on right now, but it's not an instead of, it's an and.
And we'll be doing that on the workshop, won't we? We'll do that every week, building on it each week. And I'm really, you know, and I do those things in my work and my practice, which is coming back into my body and experiencing what I'm experiencing. And that's part of our topic next week, I think, isn't it? About how that presence and self-awareness.
Yes, we'd kind of, yeah, we were talking about self-awareness, how it enhances our personal and professional lives. We've been going for about 15 minutes in our 10-minute pause. Is that we kind of maybe touched on choice, and maybe we could just very briefly just say a little bit about that before we finish up.
Is that the last bit of the thoughts we had about what we wanted to address? Just the choice left. I can't.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So what we kind of mean about being more choiceful about what we do, and I think I'll just sort of start with my own ideas. I think over this time we've kind of, because we've had time away from doing some of the stuff that maybe filled our lives more. For some people, it was a dramatic change. For some people, it maybe just means not going out to eat, or something like that. Not going to the theatre, things like that. But because there will be these moments of re-entry for you, whether that's in work and or in your personal lives, that we have an opportunity to be aware of it and make choices about what we want to do and how we want to do it. And that how could be in terms of sort of COVID protocols that will make us feel safe, but it also could be how I am going to be in myself.
Yes, in the moment.
As I, what do I want to bring of me? How do I want to bring me to those things?
I think it's very much that coming back to the eyes closed and where am I? Who am I? What's going on with my body, my feelings, my emotions, rather than being, based out there. What's everyone else doing? What's everyone else feel comfortable with? What's everyone else think I ought to be doing? Everybody's different, and they'll all have a different pace and a different need to, grade. We call it graded exposure in therapy. It's a graded exposure, and for some people that might be just standing at their front door with the door open, and for other people it might be I don't know what's open, maybe going to a public event. I'm screwing hard thinking about that's obviously too much for me, but I suppose just a little bit of a home therapy sort of tip would be to everything that you're going to do would be to visualize it first and notice your own nervous system and notice what's too much and what's a bit uncomfortable and what's easy. And you want to be pitching yourself somewhere between easy and too much. Don't do too much. And I think part of this
inching towards uncomfortable,
and be okay with being uncomfortable, because that's where where the risk is where the excitement, the life, the energy, and this whole sort of spring vibe is.
Anything else before we finish? I did want to say, if anyone has questions or feedback about anything we've talked about, maybe if you're in kind of the opposite situation from the one that we're in, and most of the people we are working within, which are people who have been at home mostly. If you've been someone who's had to be out there all year, there'll still be things that change for you as restrictions lift, as more people are vaccinated, etc., etc. So we'd just be sort of curious how this resonates with you too.
Yes, we'd love to hear people's comments, and we might be able to address and answer some of those next week. And next week we're back to our usual time of 4:30, I think.
Yes, 11:30 US Eastern Time, 4:30 UK time. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Miriam. See you next week.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.